pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3, approval of the agenda. Is there any changes from council or staff?
Nothing from staff, sir.
Council?
Were we leaving the presentation where it's at, or?
If you wanted to change it, my understanding is it would have to be after the public hearings.
That's correct.
And the public hearings are item 7A, 7B, then a recess for EDA, reconvene.
So could we make it after the public hearings but before the Economic Redevelopment Authority meeting?
Okay, so you would
that be?
Would we call that 8A, Mr. Reynolds?
Actually, that would be, yes, we can make that 8A. Yes, sir.
And so we are moving A3 up to 8A, okay, if that is acceptable with council. Acceptable? Yep. Acceptable. Okay. So now we would need a motion to approve the agenda as modified.
So I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as modified.
Second?
Second.
Motion was made by Councilor Lara, seconded by Councilor Contreras. Is there any discussion on the motion? Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 4 is consent business. Any changes to the consent? Mr. Delaney.
I'd like to pull 4A6 for discussion.
No changes from council. Motion to approve the consent as amended.
I'll make the motion to approve as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a second? Motion by Councilor Contreras, seconded by Councilor Delaney. If Mr. Reynolds would please read the consent.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council. These are consent agenda items for October 17th. 4A1 is the City Council minutes. 4A2 approves a temporary liquor license for the Scott County Historical Society. 4E3 approves a consumption and display permit for Drop Shop Pickleball Club. 4A4 is an increase to the city's annual HSA employer contribution. 4A5 is the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industries Building Official Training Grant Program grant application. 4A7 is an SCBA purchase for the fire department. 4B1 declares costs and sets assessment hearing for 2023 full-depth pavement reconstruction and pavement rehabilitation projects. 4B2 declares costs and sets the assessment hearing for the Marist Street, 13th Avenue, and Hanson Avenue Utility Extension Project. 4B3 approves plans and specifications and authorizes bidding for the Southbridge Lift Station Rehabilitation Project. 4B4 is the professional services agreement with Bolton & Mink for the Riverbank Protection and Park Integration Improvements. 4B5 awards a contract for the Scenic Heights Storm Sewer Repair. 4B6 is a professional services agreement with Short Elliott Hendrickson Incorporated for downtown ADA lighting and tree rehab. And 4B7 is a waiver of a special assessment appeal rights for Marist Street, 13th Avenue, and Hanson Street Utility Extension Project. Oh, excuse me. 4C1 is a surplus property, a dedication by the fire department. 4D1 is a planned unit development amendment to the Canterbury Southwest PUD. 4E1 is a surplus property declaration for the police department. And 4F1 is a purchase of equipment for an administration vehicle by the Public Works Department.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds.
There you go.
Any discussion on the motion? Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. So that'll take us to number 5, recognition of involved residents by the City Council. If you have an item that you'd like to discuss with the City Council that is not on the agenda, now would be that time. Please step up to the table here. You're more than welcome. Is there anybody here for an item not on our agenda tonight? Last call If there's anybody here that'd like to address an issue to the council that is not on the agenda. Okay, seeing none. Item number 6, business removed from the consent agenda. 4A6 was removed by Councilmember Delaney. Councilmember Delaney.
I need some clarification. So this is basically we went to the state and said we want to do a TIF for remediation of an area as far as the soil. And this is just, we're I guess, looking at their approval and
Yeah, essentially what we did is the council had directed staff to go to the legislature and request the opportunity for a TIF, meaning that it would be available if the council so directed that that was what would happen on the particular property.
And a little more clarification, prior to this legislative change at the state level, TIF districts were not allowed to be utilized in mining operations, correct?
Yes, sir. And, you know, there were multiple of these projects that went through the years. Each has to go in front of the legislature to get special permission to have it as an option.
Mr. Whiting?
And we're talking about, how much acreage are we talking about?
Michael?
140 acres that's currently a gravel mine.
That's currently a hole.
A hole. That wasn't properly remediated during the process. It needs complete soil corrections.
Yeah, and you could not do this today, meaning that under the current statutes, state requires that process to actually be completed as a mine is depleted. This mine is 40, 50 years old, and it never came under those particular statutes.
So they're letting us remediate this out of proper
Yes, sir.
order, I guess, or however you made it, out of regulatory compliance, I guess. So in this case, this property owner will be able to develop this property. We're using this TIF to remediate the soils only, right? Or is that how this TIF works?
Yes, sir. Essentially, it is to bring the condition to a buildable state.
how much is this will run the city TIF-wise? Do we have an estimate?
Michael? No.
They haven't made an application, have they?
No,
Okay.
there's been no application or anything yet.
But-
This is just the start of a process.
A little background. So originally when the applicant for the mining permit, the city rejected it and didn't give the permit. It went through the court system. State court ordered the city to give a permit to this mining operation. And in the findings of that court judge, he was content that the city's concerns would be mitigated in the end-use plan, which says it would fill it back in and reclaim it by putting the berms that are currently around the site back into the hole. Santec was originally hired by the operators to make sure that that fill was acceptable. Apparently that process never happened. So that's where we're at.
Okay. And if we do this, the landowner will be able to develop it for more than 12 mil, he'll be able to sell it for more than 12, or whatever the cost is to remediate the property. So basically he'll make a profit of it, but it'll cost the residents 12, 16, 18 mil to remediate.
Councilor Delaney, I can't speculate on that. I would think that if the city decided to move forward with a TIF, that certainly would impact the ability of the owner to do something, and I think that that would be something that if we got to that point, the city council could get into an agreement with that particular owner, because it's not going anywhere absent a TIF.
Just to clarify, the TIF district would pay.
Correct. It would not be
It would not
city
be coming from the
taxpayers.
taxpayers.
Correct.
It does come from, it does come from.
But it's funded through that property.
It takes future taxes from improvements on the property, and them taxes go back into paying for the improvements,
Which would never happen but for the TIF.
where your taxes on your house go into the general fund to pay services rendered to you, so that the improved properties wouldn't be paying for the services. The rest of us, any expanded services the city would have to hire and would be paid for by somebody else. So yeah, in essence, it does cost taxpayers money. But anyway,
Or no money coming in still anyway, well, we can argue that another day.
Okay, wishes of council? Any other questions?
That's all my questions. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Whiting?
Motion to adopt Resolution R 2023-123, approving laws of Minnesota 2023, Chapter 64, Article 8, Section 13, relating to the establishment of a soil deficiency tax increment financing district.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Myself.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-2 with Councilor Delaney and Mayor Lehman in the negative. Item 7A is a public hearing for the vacation of a public drainage and utility easement within the Opus MVW plat. Mr. Whiting?
Make a motion to open a public hearing.
Is there a
Second.
second? Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is open. Mr. Kursky, are you presenting? Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a public hearing for vacation of public drainage and utility easements within the Opus MVW plat. So Wolpert, the applicant representing J&J Minneapolis, who's the property owner, the vacation of a public drainage and utility easements located within the Opus MVW plat, allowing for a more viable lot for new construction. The Planning Commission unanimously approved this request. So a condition of the J&J Minneapolis plat approval was for this vacation to occur with new easements to be dedicated within the new plat. So the easements that we are talking about, there's existing in pink here, this drainage and utility easement, and then this larger drainage and utility easement on the bottom. And this is the Sanmar building here, County Highway 83 is over here. This is the new Unbridled Avenue. So here is the very specific easement. Here's the drainage and utility easement on the bottom. So this is the J&J final plat, and this will kind of clarify. So what they've done basically is moved the drainage and utility easement to the west so that Lot 2 becomes buildable, and then adjusted the one on the bottom for the new Unbridled Road and the new entrance to Lot 2. And this is what they are proposing on Lot 2, another industrial building, so that's why the drainage and utility easement goes around this property, and then it's up against this new driveway. So recommendation is the council adopt resolution 2023-116 approving the vacation of public drainage and utility easements as dedicated within the plat.
Mr. Kursky, can you go back to your second picture with the blue? There you go. I don't have that one in my packet, so I'm trying to line it up to with what I have.
Because I made that today. So what you have is, this is how it is today. So you have this easement running down through this parcel. Mm-hmm. If you remember, the city condemned this parcel here for Unbridled, and then as part of the condemnation proceedings, we sold this piece back to J&J Minneapolis, who owns this parcel. So they have done a new plat combining these and also making the adjustments. But one of the requirements in the plat that you've all approved is these easements needed to be vacated so they could be matched up with the new easements. So this is the new easement that you can see underlying here on the new plat. So
Is the top portion of this easement next to Lot 1, next to that building, is that moving? Because it looks like they're dedicating new easements because this is a completely new easement. So this is what it used to look like. So here's Lot 1 and here's the easement down here. So the closeness,
everything that's hashtagged here is
Yep.
going to be new.
Okay, so right next to the existing building is going to stay the same?
Correct.
Okay, that was my question. The second question I had was, we did something else with this project with easements, and that must have been that section further to the southeast where we vacated easements, and we're going to redraft the easements based on the needs of the utility and city stormwater and so on and so forth with the platting of that. So we're now touching that up. Is that what we're doing?
Mayor and Council, that's correct. So you've already approved this plat, but
Yep.
as part of that, you had to vacate. That was one of the requirements when that plat was signed. So that's what they're doing tonight, is basically, let me get this to work. They're
Finishing.
vacating these because
Yep.
we already have in place the new ones, once this new plat is recorded.
And then the last question is, if this is done, then they're gonna have to give easements that are required for the utilities, if there are any needs for electricity, that
Correct.
type of thing.
Mayor and council, these are drainage and utility easements, so any utilities necessary for, particularly when they build this new building, will be dedicated in those easements.
Okay. And the utility is good with that?
Yep.
Okay. Questions of staff from council? Okay, it is a public hearing. If there's anybody that would like to step forward and speak on this matter, please do so, and welcome to the council meeting. Anybody that'd like to talk on this topic? Mr. Lara,
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
second? Motion by Councilor Lara and seconded by Councilor Contreras to close the public hearing. Any discussion on the motion?
Is 7B part of a public hearing?
That's a separate public hearing. That'll be next. Any discussion on the motion? Motion is to close the public hearing. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is now closed. What's the wishes of the council? Mr. Whiting?
Motion to adopt Resolution R 2023 TAC 116, a resolution approving the vacation of public drainage and utility easements as dedicated within the Opus MVW plat.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Whiting, seconded by Councilor Contreras. Is there any discussion on the motion? Discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 7B.
Motion to open another public hearing.
Councilor Contreras makes a motion to open a public hearing for assessment hearing on delinquent garbage refuge bills with Dick Sanitation. Is there a second to her motion?
Second.
Motion seconded by Councilor Delaney. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is open. Mr. Reinhardt.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Tonight we have a public hearing scheduled for delinquent refuse bills. However, in review, it was discovered that some of the letters that were sent to property owners contained wrong amounts, and the notice of the public hearing would not have met the appropriate time requirements. Letters are being sent out to property owners with the amended amounts and then the new public hearing date of November 7th, which is the next council meeting. Staff is asking City Council open the public hearing, which you have, allow for anyone interested in the opportunity to speak, since they would have had received a letter with today's date, and then continue that public hearing until November 7th. So
Very
I
good.
do have just a brief staff presentation.
Okay.
So the city's designated garbage hauler is DSI. This process is a process we go through once a year that allows us to certify any unpaid charges to the property owner's property taxes. Reference to the city ordinance is here on the slide, but per city ordinance, the charges are the responsibility of the property owner. Per previous city council actions and our agreement with DSI, city council has authorized the collection of delinquent garbage accounts within the city's designated organized collection area. As a result, this has eliminated the need to stop service on delinquent accounts, and it ensures that there's no illegal dumping of materials throughout the city. So DSI provided the city with a list of delinquent garbage assessments that covered delinquent accounts that were greater than 60 days as of August 31st. We did make some changes to our assessment process, and that was based on city council feedback from last year as well as property owner feedback. DSI is now sending the collection letters and notices as well as collecting the payments until the city is required to provide that final listing to the county, which has created a simpler and more streamlined process, and also reduced a lot of the confusion we had with customers in the past of who to pay, since it's all being completed by DSI. This has also substantially reduced the staff time involved with the process. I do have two slides here. This first one is the original assessment list, and the next slide is a comparable of the assessment list as of today. So comparing when the public hearings was set was shown on this slide. This would be dated as of September 19th. In comparison to the previous assessment roll, we're at 376 accounts at the time we set the public hearing, which is about 70 less accounts than last year. Fast forward to today, this is the updated assessment list, which is 129 properties, totaling the amount of $21,552.40. This is as of the end of last week. So since September 19th, DSI has collected 247 payments, and this compares to the fall hearing last year of 275 payments that were outstanding. So I think they've been pretty successful in collecting from the customers. They did do one additional step this year, and they, for the customers that they had phone numbers, they also made calls as well as sending out the letters. So I think overall it's been successful in collecting payments. So property owners will have until November 17th to pay the assessment interest-free. They'll still be collected by DSI up until that point. Following that, the assessments will bear an interest rate of 6%. A $25 administrative services charge will be added to each of the account, which covers the staff time that we have in processing the certification roll. And then the city will provide that assessment list to the county, which will be on next year's property taxes. Again, we're recommending tonight that the public hearing be continued until November 7th. So remaining actions tonight, you've already opened the public hearing. It would be to continue the public hearing until November 7th. We have not received any written objections at all. So,
Question for you. Might be back a page. November 17th. So I'm assuming that's 30 days from tonight, since this is October 17th, and since we're carrying this over to November 7th, is it? Would it then be until October 7th or December 7th for that 30 days for the interest?
It should not impact that timeline. So the original notice would have been sent on that September 17th, so they've had 30 days up until this public hearing. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and that November 17th is kind of somewhat of a hard deadline because the county asked for the roll right after that.
Okay. So. Any questions of staff? Questions of staff? None? It is a public hearing. If anybody would like to speak on this matter, please step forward. Is there anybody here for delinquent garbage bills? It is a public hearing. You'll also have a chance November 7th. Mr. Whiting.
Well, hearing nobody clamor up here, I'll move to continue this public hearing to, what was the date, November 7th, 2023.
Is there a second? Mr. Delaney? Motion by Councilor Whiting to continue the public hearing till November 7th, 2023, seconded by Councilor Delaney. We good? Any questions on the motion? Questions on the motion?
Close it? No, not yet.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. To clarify, we're not closing the public hearing. We're continuing it
Correct. Sorry. Yep.
until the next meeting so that proper
Stays open,
notifications
yep.
get out there.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us to item 10A3, which is now 8A, which is a presentation and discussion by Shakopee Youth Leagues regarding possible future multi-use dome. And if you give us 1 second to take you out of order here, I'm ready to go. You guys ready to go?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm ready. There's something I'll correct there.
Welcome. You want to pull that microphone up a little closer. I know we're not very good at up here either, so if you can't hear us, go ahead and say so and jump on us, yell at us, and we'll speak in the mics too. You tell us who you are and go ahead and give us your presentation. Thanks for coming.
My name is Ann Aris, and I'm just a resident of Shakopee. My kids are in multiple activities within Shakopee, so thanks for allowing us to speak tonight. I'm going to introduce
Yeah, hi, good evening. My name's Carl Hensley. I'm the current president of the Shakopee Soccer Association. Thanks for having us here tonight. Between Ann and I, we'll both walk through a little bit of the presentation today, and then we'll certainly open up the floor to any questions you might have for us.
So this slide is our community representation of all the organizations that have come
I'm
together.
sorry, can you please speak directly into the mic, because otherwise
Sure.
people that are watching can't hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
You could just bend it back and forth like that for you guys, okay?
We'll do that, okay. So this is our community representation of all the organizations who've come together and helped with this presentation. So we'd like to say thank you to all of them, and these are the leaders of the different organizations. So Carl is going to be presenting alongside me tonight.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is start with a little bit of just an executive summary. What we're really trying to accomplish here tonight is a vote, preferably in the affirmative, that will get City Council approval for a feasibility study for an indoor field house somewhere in the Shakopee community. We really see that there's three primary advantages and cause for change here to implement this kind of structure. The first is that we do see growth in youth sports. In particular, we've got 4,000 youth athletes in all the different clubs and associations that you saw on the first slide. Also, I'm going to show you a little bit of the spaces that exist today and where we have what we consider to be a constrained environment where the demand for these spaces are more than what we actually have in capacity. The second is around diversity and inclusion. So we look at youth sports and we definitely see an opportunity where we're able to give a good cross representation of the community here in Shakopee. We're also able to bring financial aid to those homes that don't necessarily have the financial means to be able to participate in youth sports. We'll show you that. And then lastly, we also see some use cases beyond youth sports for this kind of structure. And so it doesn't have to just be the activities that we represent. We also see some use cases beyond that. And then lastly, we also are looking at revenue. Certainly today, we're spending roughly $100,000 per year outside of the city of Shakopee to rent space for these kinds of facilities. And then because we know that there is a demand that is above our capacity, we do expect to see some revenue from outside communities and associations that could potentially also fill up any vacancy that we might have in this kind of structure. So that's the overall executive summary. I think from here we're also going to walk in a little bit more detail on each of those areas. So looking at growth. So I mentioned at the beginning that we have about 4,000 kids participating in youth athletics, and this would be both at the competitive and at the recreational level. You can see each of the clubs represented here. Over the last several years, we've been growing at roughly 10%. All associations aren't necessarily at that same rate, but the ones that we look at a weighted average, we see roughly about 10%. At these rates, I would expect two things. One, we'll see roughly another 400 kids per year join the programs. And then secondly, we'll double the amount of kids that we'll have in the associations here in the next 10 years. So we definitely have strong growth in the participation that we're getting in each of the clubs. Secondly, also on growth. I talked about it at the beginning, but we have a situation where there is more demand than we have capacity. That might seem hard to believe for those that maybe do travel around the Twin Cities. You're going to maybe see domes and other field houses, and it kind of seems like how can that maybe quite possibly be the case? But what we've got here listed is a table of all of the different indoor facilities that we could possibly use for our youth programs in the metro area. And what I'll point out is there's I guess a light pink color here on this screen, but anything that's in that pink color that says full, we've been unable to secure any space or time in any of these facilities. These are ranked in descending order from distance away from Shakopee. So the first several are within Savage, Eden Prairie, Carver County area. They're within about 10 miles. Those are all full. We do have some partial ability to rent from a facility in Burnsville as well as at Champions Hall in Eden Prairie. The reason I say partial is because we have some really undesirable times. It's Saturday evening from 5 to 9 and Thursday from 8 to 10 p.m. So we're kind of in this later in the day kind of opportunity for our youth sports to be able to use these facilities. And then as we move down the list, the rest of them from Braemar all the way down to Maple Grove, we don't have any ability to rent these spaces. So really, the only one that does still have some capacity is in Northfield. It's the Dundas Dome, and that's 41 miles from here. So we may end up using that in limited cases, but we're really asking families to have to drive 41 miles to be able to use those spaces.
So just like Carl had said, we had those 3 buckets, and I'm going to talk about case for change and looking at diversity and inclusion. It is broken down in 2 areas. The first is looking at the youth sports and the connection to the community. The financial aid is our partnership and commitment to our community and families to alleviate the cost barrier. As you can see, in 2023, we gave over $67,000 to economic hardship families through the Shakopee Youth Sports financial aid. So this allows families the accessibility to Shakopee Youth Sports, and we continue to also look for opportunities for growth with our community partnerships, and that is such as like the CAP agency to have outreach to other families in our community and surrounding communities. We need to help our families alleviate other obstacles. And this is what Carl was talking about with time slots. We're talking about 7, 8-year-olds at 8 to 10 o'clock at night is just not doable, and it gets families not to even join or be a part of our community. But then also too, the participation spaces like Carl has showed on the previous slide. I mean, asking families to drive 41 miles one way and then turn around and do it, and for that space is quite, it's a big distance. So the second point then too on this diversity and inclusion is looking at inclusion of cases beyond youth sports, and some of those are include but are not limited to. Some of the things you can see here is adult sports, craft and trade shows, fitness classes, voting, youth organizations such as Scouts, and walking and jogging clubs. So looking at that. So this slide covers our 3rd bucket that Carl said in the executive summary, and this is the case for change and focuses on revenue in 2 areas, expenses and demand. The chart, this chart in the first column focuses on the expenses and what organizations are already spending outside the city of Shakopee for indoor space, and it's over $106,000. A few organizations don't spend any money because they can't get the indoor space, so there is a 0 for them. They would love to have that opportunity. There are opportunities for growth and beyond what our expenditures say today, because that second column focuses on the external demand. It displays many organizations that would love to spend that money on an indoor facility in the Shakopee area, in a Shakopee complex. We know organizations like basketball and volleyball would not directly benefit from an indoor facility, but moving other sports to an indoor facility would directly impact and benefit those associations and organizations because it would open up the gym space for increased use and revenue. There are other possibilities for additional revenue income generating activities, such as the potential for restaurants in the nearby, golf simulators, birthday parties, but also the ability to rent out field houses if not in capacity. Given the capacity that you saw in that one chart in the neighboring cities and towns, there is a possibility additional for revenue through that. And as the saying goes, if you build it, they will come.
All right, thanks, Ann. So just to wrap up where we started, we definitely see some opportunities here in the 3 main categories that we try to lay out today, which growth, we believe we have good participation today, but really only expecting to see increased numbers in our program. We also believe that we do have a shortage of capacity for these types of spaces. Diversity and inclusion, we do feel like we're getting to good cross-section of the population through the youth sports. And then as Ann just laid out, there definitely are some use cases beyond just what we're here representing today that should be in the consideration. And then lastly, there is a fair amount of revenue that's leaving the city every single year. I think that is opportunity to come back, but also because of the demand that is in excess of capacity, we definitely have opportunities to bring in outside revenue just from neighboring communities. So with that being said, we are looking for approval for the feasibility of an indoor field house, and we'll be certainly open to answer any questions you might have for us today.
Questions from council?
First, I'd like to thank you for bringing this to our attention and for presenting tonight. Thank you.
Any questions?
First question, I don't see the school district represented here. Is there a reason or?
So as far as the school district, we do have some of our high school coaches here. As far as the school district, I do attend I have attended the indoor-outdoor association meetings, and every half year, I think they're moving it to once a year. That conversation with the school district has been brought up, and they have not had any answers to be able to give to the organizations. Us as organizations are all volunteers, so we don't even know where to start. So that's why we're coming here for help, is like, how do we even get started looking into what this would look like for our community? So as far as the school district, we'd love to be involved in the school district. We're open to whether that's a city, private, or a school district, a combination, how that looks. We just don't know, because we're just asking for help.
I guess I want to kind of visualize this a little more, sorry. Are we talking about a bubble?
So I think we don't want to constrain your thinking on that, but I think it could be one of a couple different structures. I think we're familiar with two primarily. One would be a bubble type dome situation. The other would be more of a physical permanent structure. I don't know that I can give you all the differences and why you consider one over the other. I know in a dome situation you have to have expenses that would tear it down out of season and then put it back up. I think where we've seen and have experience, we've seen the more hard structure that can be used year-round, you avoid those costs, but you might have some more capital up front that, again, I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that. So I think it's either of those two scenarios, but that's effectively what we're seeking some feasibility around, is what would you recommend? How should we think about it? Where would we put it? Those kinds of things.
And you've talked to your different associations. Would you be considering guaranteed time commitments and hourly commitments, some sort of guaranteed operational usage?
I think we could definitely give you a pretty good range of what we would definitely be demanding out of this type of facility. That's something we can provide for you.
But we'd be looking for commitments, just in my humble opinion.
I think it's something we can commit to if this is the direction we need to go, absolutely.
And if I may, in any type of facility, whether it's temporary like a bubble or a permanent facility, there's costs to manage, there's costs to maintain, there's costs to program. And I'm assuming that those would be costs that the taxpayers would be taking on to manage that facility, because we know how each group is fighting for time, and you know, those commitments have to be weighed in all of those different stories. And we have great staff that do that already, so I think that would be part of it, but just to make sure I'm laying it out there, there's a lot of costs that don't go into like a $10 million building, so legacy costs, I guess I'll call them, but not much of a question, but a comment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Whiting. Side, Mr. Lara?
When you're talking about time commitment, you're only speaking for soccer, correct? Or are you representing other organizations that would use it?
Yeah, this is, I think it was maybe slide 3. You can see all of the different associations that are currently using indoor facility spaces. Certainly soccer has maybe a weighted, proportionate amount of the use cases, but you can see that volleyball would use some, girls basketball, softball, lacrosse would all have engagement in this type of facility.
Mr. Lara, I'm good. Thank you. Councilor Contreras?
Yep. Have you guys thought of a location where you guys were brainstorming this facility?
No, I mean, as we said before, just as volunteers, we don't even know where to begin and how you would look into that situation, where it would be. So we're looking for guidance of like what that looks like, because we all do this out of, to see whether it's our children and our community grow within our youth activities. We just don't know.
Okay. All right, I got it.
All right, so I'll
Okay,
get
go
mine,
ahead, I got some
and then we'll go
questions,
back down the list, because maybe I'll spark something or something.
Yes, thank you.
So with what information that I have from what you're saying, and by all means correct me if I get this wrong, but the first thing that comes to my mind is size, height, acreage needs, and then the size is kind of dependent on cross usage, right? So if you want to put a sheet of ice in there and have baseball going on at the same time, that's gonna make the facility that much larger, and then you've got one that has to be cold and one not cold. And some of these uses are different in height needs. Baseball, you know, pretty high, hit the ball and stuff. Soccer, not as high as baseball. And I'm just kind of thinking through some of this stuff. And then there's always the big one, the dollar signs. I mean, the size I looked up, was it Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, I think was one that's just opening up. It was like a $9 million project. And then their operational cost based on the article, and this is from an article that I read about it in the Star Tribune. I think their operational cost was $4 to $6 per square foot. But I don't know exactly what they're using it all for. It was pretty good size. What was the size? It was, I can't remember. Search it, you'll be able to find it. So really we get down to, okay, so let's just say $8-10 million. Where's that money gonna come from? The city's park fund right now projected, Councilor Delaney's been keeping his eye on that. What's it projected to be in 26? Negative $6 million, I think. If, you know, everything gets done that's proposed, which obviously ain't gonna happen because the money's not there. But then you have the operational cost on top of it. I know we had a dome at one time. It was vandalized once and it collapsed another time, and there's, you know, after researching some of these domes, they seem to be more of a problem than they are benefit, in our climate anyway. You know, you get a good snow and you're kind of in trouble. But if you're looking for a space, I don't know, that might be a better option. I don't know that because now you have the height issue and the size if you're going to be cross-using. And I don't know how you get over that hurdle, because to build something that size, the question would probably be better for Mr. Kursky dealing with some of them great big giant data center type developments. They're pretty expensive. They're going to be much more expensive to build and operate, and then you have to put the capital out there 20, 30 years down the road. You have to replace it, and that replacement cost is probably about 2 times what the original build cost was, depending on what happens with, you know, inflation and federal policy and state policy and so on. So, yeah, you've got a big hurdle here. I don't know where to steer you to. You know, looking at some of your data on page, would it be, I guess, front page 1, 2, 3, where it shows the participation. Soccer seems, and that was a question I had. Were these numbers the increase or the total participation?
Yeah, these are total participation. Yeah,
Okay.
they've increased by, just this past year, but they've increased year over year about 10% from the year prior.
My granddaughter plays in the soccer, so we had the big soccer blast in Shakopee here, and it was everywhere. It was kind of cool, but all of it was outdoors. But there's some uses in here that are so small that, you know, it almost wouldn't make sense to try to fit them into a multi-use because it's taken away from the areas where there's a larger use. And I don't know how you're going to be able to have a warm use and a cold use in the same building. I don't think that's possible. So,
I don't think we'd be focused on the cold use. I think this would be more on the
well, then
the
you'd
warm
have to take
side.
like hockey out of here.
Yeah, I think in one of the farther decks, hockey didn't indicate that they would need or spend money for this type of program.
Yeah.
So
Looks like volleyball.
yeah, volleyball would.
Soccer's a big one, right?
Yep, soccer's a big one. Lacrosse, softball,
So-
volleyball, and then you also have football that isn't today,
So
but would.
You'd
And
have to make soccer your number one priority if that's the one where the revenue's coming from and where the growth is. And then you'd have to design the facility for that, which may cost you use of other types of uses. But, I mean, that's what it is, right? You know, I think we're ahead of ourselves trying to do a feasibility study when we don't have any dollars to move forward with anything that the feasibility study says,
Yeah.
you know.
I was just going to add that in. Oh, I'm sorry, I was going to add that in. I mean, it seems like they ask us for a dome, but we don't have any specific details. How many fields, partners, anticipated revenue we're going to get the money from. I mean, if you look at some of the surrounding cities, they did do public-private partnerships. I think one of the first big ones was, 14 mil, but they did a special, what was it? But, I mean, getting back to it, I don't think there's enough information there to ask staff to go off and do anything toward feasibility. I think we're at the point where if the parents are willing, I got counsel. I know how the other cities have managed this. I know Lakeville did what they called a task force where the city kind of went out and got partners and discussed cost, size, partners, and then brought that back with a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Councilor Delaney. Let me just bring up one past example, and then we'll move back to council. Mr. Whiting, you were next, okay? We had the tennis,
Yep.
where the Shoe Truck Park parcel, and they came forward and they wanted to do something like you're suggesting, and we offered to let them use that property under an agreement. I can't remember, it was like $1 or something, some kind of agreement for that piece of property, providing they raise the revenue to build the structure. I think it was 3 or 4 years later, Mr. Reynolds can correct me, that it just didn't happen. The dollars they thought they could raise weren't able to be raised, and they found out what it was going to cost. You know, so I don't know if there's space available. That would be a question toward Mr. Kursky. You could meet up with him sometime and ask what's available in town to be able to maybe lease, because that might give you the option of not having such huge capital cost. You'd be able to lease a space big enough for a couple of soccer fields, and then you might be able, if you're lucky, to lease it just for the times that you need it the most in the winter, right? Mr. Whiting.
No, I think you're reading my notes here. I think I had the tennis facility
Well,
down
I
here,
said
so
that.
that's right. But they had and you don't have tennis on here, but they had a good proposal and had moved forward with some designs, and I would suggest with that task force, getting together with them, because they clearly had some eyes on some money and a lot of data on regional support that they felt that they could bring.
They focused on their one top use too.
Well, but it was one top use, but I think there could be room for partnerships here, and then we'd like to do partnerships in Shakopee. But they had funding mechanisms, and like I mentioned, a lot of the regional support that would say, well, we figured this group would be buying in at this much, so we know some demographics of the area to help support the decision. And some of that would be from the task force type group that you might put together.
There you could do a yearly lease, and you could sublease the least amount of time that you don't need it for that high use to another group. And it would be a revenue stream to the main organization.
Throw a pickleball and putt in there, and you'd have pickleball.
So here we are, we're being your task force.
I was going to say that I know in the past there was, if you're looking for partnerships, examples, there was Velocity Sports Performance off of 42. That was a massive indoor turf field with track and trainers, and it disappeared. I think it went out of business, but I think there is a go-kart place in there now. But that would be, I know we have facilities big that same size within the city. If you could find partners like that to have indoor fields. So.
Anybody else? Mr. Reynolds? Anything?
No, sir.
Got $10 million in your pocket? No? Okay. Finance guy? You got your printer downstairs you can fire up?
That's not hooked up.
No? Only the feds can do that. Mr. Lara?
So am I understanding correctly that what I'm understanding is you made your presentation and you're asking, help us, where do we go from here? What do we do? Who do we talk to? What do we need to do to get ideas rolling? I would, and then on my recommendation here, it's suggested that we direct staff on where to take this. And I would think that You guys had discussed about establishing a task force in terms of not necessarily feasibility, but partnerships and just different ideas, locations and such. So I think that if council agrees that we would direct staff to provide a contact for them to maybe give them some points, maybe 4 or 5 points of here's what you need to start the direction, and let them see what they can come up with.
I can appreciate what you're trying to accomplish, but you're asking them, here's what you need to start the direction, but I think you need to know what it is you want to accomplish first before you can figure out how to accomplish it.
Sure.
So the question is, what is it they want to accomplish? And I think what Councilor Whiting is saying is they need to, within their own group, figure out what it is they need to accomplish and for what use. Because not all of these uses are going to be able to be in one space.
If I may add, I think city staff would be more than welcome to add and help, as helpful as they can in any kind of conversations.
Well, and I don't think we need a direction. I think as citizens, you can walk into City Hall and ask, you know, what size spaces are available for lease, what's the going lease price.
What property the city owns.
You can walk into community center and make an appointment to sit down with the Park and Rec director. He's got a wealth of knowledge in this area. And you can do that with any other city staff just as a citizen. Granted, you might have to make an appointment. They're just not sitting there waiting for something to do. With us up here, we give them too much to do sometimes. But, and I think that would be a good place to start, because I think you're really going to have to narrow down what it is you're trying to accomplish and for what use. Sounds like wintertime use, soccer's probably the top. Is there a way to cross a couple of these other things in there? I don't know what kind of floor is going to be required for soccer. It's probably compatible with volleyball and some of the other stuff, not basketball. Once you get into multi-use like that, it starts getting pretty expensive.
So for next steps, what will we, I mean, what would the direction be?
I would have these groups get together and form a task force and have the discussions that we are having as a group and find out, you know, what the priorities are, what the winter needs are, because that's really what it sounds like the need is, and which one would best, you know, which one you want to do that with. And then you're going to have to, you know, once you get that done, then you can start thinking about partners and funding options.
Somebody up there.
Do you have something to add, sir?
Yeah, I actually had done the research on many of your specific questions, so I was like, why don't I just answer them, and then we can get rid of the mystery. The mystery here. So I think a few of them were.
Excuse me, your name, please.
Oh, Brad Thompson.
Are you on this list?
Probably not. You know me, Matt.
Yeah,
We've actually chatted a few times.
You're representing which group, or just in general?
Yeah, we're in several of these sports.
Okay.
So the ask about how would you do a mixed use facility, it's actually not that tricky. You're really going for like turf, maybe maximum basketball. Why the other people care is because you'll get out of their facility. They want you out of their stuff. Yeah. So basketball probably has no use for turf beyond some, you know, maybe some training, but they want you off their courts. So they're here represented, hoping we leave, right? And then, you know, as far as like, how do you fund it? I mean, clearly, I mean, there's ways to do it, but I think what we're asking today potentially is, do you have a way to help us figure out where you could put a facility? That'd be a good way forward. And then I think based on what we're hearing, we kind of are getting the sense that we have to fund this outside of the city. And that's probably where we're going. And so now we have the direction of, you know, like the example you brought, the new facility, I believe it's Anoka Ramsey, and you said it was $12 million-ish?
8 to 9, and it was Brooklyn Center, I believe.
Well, the Anoka Ramsey is the biggest one now in the United States, and they paid for that with e-tabs. So, I mean, that's something we've
considered and are exploring, and that might be a way we do pay for something like this. It would take a little, you know.
Are you talking electronic gambling or?
Yep, exactly, yep. Hockey actually is smart enough to actually have started into that, and they fund things through e-tabs, you know, iPad. It's supposed to be like a pull tab. Anyway, that's a way we could pay for it, but I mean, I think the next steps for you guys is where would we put it? And then I think what we need back is, what are some ways we could pay for it? You know, would it be a levy, or do we need private funding? I think the request of, would we put in guarantees? Yes, that's very common. You often guarantee a minimum amount of hours rented at a certain rate, right? And then the biggest thing is, this isn't unknowable. There are companies literally in town, I think there's 2 that do domes, and so they'll give you all kinds of free, they'll give you plans, they'll say, what's your size? And because there's 2, they're flipping a coin on, are we gonna get the bid, or are they gonna get the bid? So they're more, you know, they'll roll out the red carpet to say, here's our proposal, here's how we do it, here's how much it would cost. And that's, I think, our responsibility, to go through and come up with those things. But what we need to know is there a spot? Can we put this somewhere?
How much acreage are you looking for?
I mean, I think we'd use some of the, like, when you meet with these companies, for example, they give you here's your typical, and then they'll give you a range. And so yes, it sounds like we owe you a specific acreage. We're looking for this. Where could we put it? Here's the services we need. And then I think we owe you a timeline. We'd want to do this in X, I don't want to say years, I want to say months, but let's be realistic, X years, right? So I think that's what we owe you, and what we're looking for is a little commitment that if we come back with specific acreage, utilities, we'll get plans, we'll have the developers come and say, here's what we could pitch based on what you guys, you know, what you guys come back with. And then we'd like to explore is there a levy? Do we need to go private? I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can fund things like this.
A levy meaning you want us to use the tax base to pay for it.
We'd want to put out a vote to say, does this community want to pay for a dome? Right? I mean, and it could be absolutely not. We don't want to do that. Well, then it's a clear indication we have to go e-tabs, we have to go donations, we have to have the rich uncle, you know, like whatever it is, you know. Does that make sense though? What we're asking for today is, we need to know if we get back to you with a proposal, here's the minimum, here's the maximum, what could you guys do with that? And then I think even, you know, if we're years out, it would be amazing too if you guys had maybe a vacancy that you could say, hey, soccer, stop spending your money in Eden Prairie and spend it here in this vacant building. I mean, that'd be amazing too.
Mr. Reynolds has a
Mr. Rouse?
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, we don't have any land available. The only undeveloped parkland that we really have of any significant size is the Shoe Truck property, which would not be big enough for a dome facility. And it really wouldn't fit into that particular area. So what you literally need to figure out is where there is land available. We as a city do not have land available.
And we don't know what size is needed.
Yeah, correct. But the Shoe Truck property certainly would not be big enough.
I don't know what the school district's plan is with the land they've got south of town.
And then you have water and sewage issues,
Right.
Which aren't currently run out there.
Right.
There's a lot of work that would be needed to be done. There's no property that's available that has water and sewer on it of any means right now. And as we continue to move west, eventually water and sewer will go west, but all of that property is being bought up at premium dollars by developers who are putting houses on it. So, your real problem is finding a place to put anything.
And you need to know the size, and then you need to, and that's kind of why I was thinking if you could find a big building that's for lease, you might be able to use that inside during the winter months. If you can narrow down the use.
Store the turf.
You know, roll out the turf and you're good to go, but you'd have to be high enough, and I don't know what them requirements are.
So to fast track though, the question, if we wanted to, if we gave you a specific plot of land. We need something X size. Could you at least explain to us how we'd go about annexing that, or however you guys do it? I know there's land to the west or by the bowl or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Well, you would have to own the land, and then you would request to annex into the city, and then, depending on where that land is located, we would run utilities to it. It could be many years out, depending on where the scope of growth is happening.
And the annexation agreement requires it be contiguous on certain amounts of size with certain amount of distance.
so I think the sense we're getting is we'd have to go private, buy the land ourselves, and move that direction. Is that kind of what the sense we're getting?
Well, we just don't have the land. I mean, you know, we can't,
We don't know what the size requirement is needed either. I mean, the tennis people had a size that they said would fit on that location and a drawing of how it would fit. And then the council then said, okay, if you guys raised the money to build it and stuff, we'll let you put it on that land. But we don't know what your size need is.
I mean, I could have you a range tomorrow to you. I mean, that's not the question that's going to stop this discussion, right? It's a knowable figure. So,
right, but the knowable figure is that we do not have land
sure,
of any
sure.
significant size. We would have to purchase that as a city, which would be through tax dollars, and that certainly can be done. But you know, that would be at a premium, especially as we're looking at West, where developers are buying that property as it is, and like I said, at a very high premium.
Okay. I mean, do you guys think you got what you needed here? All right.
Thank you for coming out.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for everything you do with all these kids, too.
Another gentleman would speak from football. AJ.
Since it's not an open meeting, try to be brief. Name, please?
Will do. AJ Potamo, president of Shakopee Youth Football. Coming down to support this idea, obviously the great work you guys have done, and some of the things I just wanted to point out real quick, when we're looking at some of these numbers, football obviously not using any money right now, but we have a very big need throughout the year to continue programs like spring flag football. Also, our varsity youth, our kids going into varsity are using the basketball gyms like they were just saying, running on those gyms floors, and they really want them off of those courts. And we could start providing more, leagues for the kids. That number 400 is for a 3-month span out of the year. We would probably get upwards of 1,000 to 1,200, which would be money that could be spent back here in Shakopee for the dome. This is not something that I've spoken with with soccer about, but we do have land on 17th Avenue Sports Complex that maybe possibly we could erect a dome there. And I apologize for bringing this up, guys, right here on the spot, but I just wanted to kind of see if that's something that the city could approve, if soccer or the other associations would want to go that way, is using existing land that we have, that would be the space of 2 football fields or / 2 soccer fields, and erect a dome there. It wouldn't be the use that we're looking at right now, but if there's no land available and we can't come up with the money for something else, that could be an idea that we could discuss. Is that something that the city would be willing to or open to discuss?
So our current 17th Avenue fields, you would make into an indoor facility?
I'm just throwing the idea out here while we're talking. I have not talked to soccer about it. I have not talked to any other social. Yeah, not the whole thing. No.
Well, that would be a school discussion one. It's their property, isn't it?
No, the 17th Avenue facility.
No, 17th.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But the problem is that, if you do that, you're going to need parking, you're going to need everything else that is involved with it. And then you're taking away those soccer fields.
Well, soccer would use them as well. And again, I'm not speaking for soccer at all. I'm only speaking for football, and I was just
Right,
kind of
but
throwing the idea to see if...
does soccer want to downsize and make their soccer fields football fields?
Well, they would still use it.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, you'd still use it. So like at Vaughn Stadium, the football and soccer teams there use the same fields. Same with what's behind the high school. There's the football the football practice area, but also soccer practices back there as well. So what they're saying, or is you could turf those fields, put domes over 1 and 2, we call them fields 1 and 2, but that's kind of where where we have existing land, and there's 2 football fields, but it's also 2 soccer fields lined up next to each other.
Can I just ask, you haven't talked to the school district, they've got a field house. I mean, that was built with taxpayer dollars. Has there been any discussion with the high school about using the field house for any of your activities?
So we currently use the field house on Sunday afternoons when we can. We actually are very limited in that field house because of the space. It's already being used. So we actually have to go to the elementary schools on Sunday to play futsal, which is a weighted ball to play in the elementary school gyms to get our extra training in. So we already are using all the space. We do not get to use the field house on a regular basis because basketball and volleyball and the indoor spaces use those primarily, and they're filled.
Mr. Whiting?
We're not going to be able to figure this out tonight. So what I'm seeing is you got about $100,000, maybe $106,000 of annual revenue that could go into a project to help fund something like this. I think you guys need to come back with a little more organization on who's partnering up, where your partners are, what facilities you need, and what you're looking at, and maybe get with staff and see what's available. Talk to the school district, see if they'll partner. Maybe they have something we can work with. So, but I don't think we're going to get any farther tonight.
No, I don't think so either. Councilor Contreras?
Councilor Jay did take my idea. I think one of the main things is also to reach out to the school district. I think that's a venue or an area where you need to explore a little more. They do have, a land in the back where, from a long time ago, I heard there was a dome that was supposed to, have been built there. So why wasn't it, or what happened? I don't know, but I feel that there's potential there. So if you guys would reach out to them and see where they stand, and yeah, that's my idea.
I was going to mention that same thing. I again, don't know how true that is, but that was my understanding too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback.
Short recess and let the room clear out.
I'll make a motion for a 9-minute recess.
For a second?
Second.
Motion second, discussion on the motion. Discussion on the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. We're in recess for 9 minutes.
Any questions?
All right, we are back on the air, folks. We are now moving to item number 8, recess for Economic Development Authority meeting. A motion would be in order. Mr. Lara?
I'll make a motion to recess for the Economic Development Authority meeting.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Delaney. Is there any discussion on the motion? Discussion, seeing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned. There you go, Madam President.
Recessed. Yeah.
We gotta come back from recess.
We're recessed for the economic.
Recessed. City Council for the Economic Development Authority meeting. My apologies. Thank you. See why we pay you?
I am calling to order the Shakopee Economic Development Authority meeting for October 17, 2023. Staff, if you could make note of the roll, please. Thank you. Number 2 on is the approval of the agenda. Councilors, commissioners, sorry. Commissioner,
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
thank you. So we have a motion by Commissioner Lehman and a second by Commissioner Delaney. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Number 3, so for consent business, we have our EDA minutes. Did everybody get a chance to look at them, and any questions? No questions? No questions?
Make a motion to approve the consent business that includes the EDA minutes.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Whiting. Do we have a second?
Second.
By Commissioner Delaney. So any questions again? Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Number 4, our general business, we have the review of our current incentive policy. Good evening, Mr. Kursky.
Madam Chairwoman and board members, this is the discussion on our current subsidy policy. I included in your package the current policy. A little brief history: was first adopted in 2012 at 200% of the federal minimum wage, which equaled $14 an hour, modified in 2016 to $19 an hour exclusive of benefits, and jobs retained did not need to meet that requirement. Modified again in 2019 to $20 an hour exclusive of benefits, and then in 2020 we had a pretty lengthy discussion. It was moved to $24 an average overall exclusive of benefits, and it also we excluded the senior management positions so it wouldn't skew the hourly wage.
Okay.
So these are most current numbers available from the federal government. We did this back in 2020 when we talked about wages and where Shakopee sat. So median earnings today is $60,687 in Shakopee. You can see we're just slightly above Minnesota average and below most of the other cities, including Carver, Chaska, Savage, Prior Lake, Eden Prairie, and Chanhassen. And then the median household income is $96,473. So you can see we are actually higher than some of those other cities. We're higher than Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Chaska, but again below Savage, Carver, Prior Lake, Eden Prairie, and Chanhassen.
Mr. Kursky.
Yes.
What's the Minnesota average?
I'm trying to remember, 50, just over, I think it's 50 some odd thousand.
56, 58, yeah.
What's that?
Oh, it was 56, 58, I'm not sure.
I'll go 57 just to be in the middle. Okay.
So I think one of the things important to talk about is employment trends for Shakopee. So these are actual numbers as of today for Shakopee. So this is a 5-year employment trend. So you can see our peak employment in Shakopee was June of 2020 at 25,265. We took a dip right after we kind of came out of COVID. We're right now sitting at 24,558. So we're still well above 24,000, which is kind of that line. You look back in 2019, we were well below that. And here's the 1-year employment trend. So again, you can see February took kind of a dip. So 24,000 is kind of the baseline on just the first line there. So we're at 24,558 as of today. We had a slight uptick in July, but we have had some layoffs since at Shutterfly, and a couple other businesses in town laid off, so that's why you saw somewhat of a downward trend. But we're still, if you look at the 5-year average for employment, we're still pretty high as a community. We are, I believe the latest number shows that we're about 47% of Scott County's total jobs.
47%.
And then we've talked about how do we grow, our jobs. If you remember, we started the entrepreneurship program a year and a half ago. We had 4 companies. Right now we're at 25. The group continues to grow. I think one of the things we talked about today is actually going out and meeting with some of the larger companies to let them know that these companies exist in the region and how they can start working together, because there's some potential. Every company always has kind of a skunk works out there, and a lot of them have moved them out of the companies to try and start companies on the side that sometimes are more successful than the parent company. I don't know if some of you read, 3M was one of the leading companies in Minnesota for research and development. You think about all the products that have been developed there over the years. Today, they're at about 50% of what they used to spend on R&D, and their number of patents have dropped significantly. I think the future for Minnesota are these smaller companies that are kind of coming up with new technologies and ideas that will kind of grow into some of those larger companies in the future. So to get back to where we are, so we're at $24 an hour right now to receive any incentives exclusive of benefits, and also includes the senior management positions.
Okay. Thank you. I know that you had asked for this before, so I'll let you
Thank you.
go for it.
The reason I wanted us to look at this again, well, actually, council agreed to take a look at this, was
Right.
These numbers are from 2020, and I mean, we've seen some significant inflation since then. And if I do that, I pulled my phone out only for the calculator, it's actually turned off. So if I use $24 an hour, 2,080 hour a year, full-time hours, and then I subtract 20%, 15 is going to FICA, Social Security, Medicare, and then just a 5% tax, you're looking at 40,000, right? So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to come up with a number that, if we're going to give incentives away, that the hourly rate pays enough that the people the reason we're subsidizing it isn't so that the employees now are making low enough wage. They don't make enough to not require other taxpayer subsidies, whether it's healthcare, housing, energy assistance, food assistance, all these other types of things. I mean, the goal is to incentivize for jobs that move people up the economic ladder to where they don't need other subsidies, and that's why I wanted to bring it forward.
And Mayor and board members, so that's why the median earnings in Shakopee is at $60,687. So that's our midpoint.
But we don't even require that for business subsidy.
In no other city that I was able to research anywhere in the metro has even $1. We're the only city that actually has a wage requirement. So I think the benefit of that is we've been able to use that to our advantage. I think depending where you all put the number, there are other places they can go that don't have any requirement. I was shocked to see Edina, Bloomington, Eden Prairie, none of them have a wage requirement. It's really all based on investment.
What we're seeing is Madam
No,
President,
go ahead.
we're seeing the entry market jobs increasing the hourly rate. I don't want to pick on McDonald's or the fast food chains, but they're entry-level jobs, right? And when they're paying $18 to $20 an hour, and our business subsidy policy is kind of right in that ballpark, that's telling me that we might be low. And I think we're seeing that because of the job pressures to get workers, but on the other side, you've got the inflationary impacts too, so.
Commissioner Whiting?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really don't want to stifle the use of this tool that we have here, but I don't want to be encouraging warehouse jobs either. And that's roughly what I'm seeing as the rate, $24. And I don't want to diss anybody either. That's a fair pay, but We've excluded the senior management, and I'd wonder if we could look at this at using it for non-exempt employees only. So only hourly employees, cut all the management staff off, and then look at it that way, and $24 an hour, then that's, that makes a little more sense.
So, Madam President, board members, that's what we did on the Sam's Club project. So there's a building that had been sitting, so you only abated actually their improvements for still the 30-some-odd million dollars of value for the empty structures stayed on the tax rolls. But they had people there making $150,000, $180,000 a year that are senior management. They were not included in that hourly wage.
How do we define senior management is what I'm saying, and
yeah, I mean,
you could peg all right, you got a new title, but you're making $100 grand still. So what I'm trying to say is, if it's non-exempt and it's $24 an hour, that's not a salaried employee, that's an hourly. But you're saying that they're hourly making that. It could happen.
Yeah. So what companies do is they submit the blank entire payroll to us. So from the most expensive person down to the lowest person. And we look at what that median is, and then we average it out, and we take those top jobs out so that they're not included in that average wage. Because if we had included them in Sam's Club, I mean, when you start adding in people that are making $150,000, I could pay you $18, and the average would be 24. That's why we take them out.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If it's like a supervisor and above, if you're looking at your working folks that we're trying to incentivize here, in my mind.
Right.
Right, no, and I understand the points you're making. My worry, and truly in being honest, is I don't want to set the wage at such a level where then we lose this tool that we have. So that's where I'm, I appreciate and I understand the idea of, paying reasonable, but not losing the tool to where then businesses come and they're like, well, that's way too high, so I don't know if I should ask Commissioner Lara what you're thinking.
I mean, one thought I had was, I just want to make sure that we have, so when a business comes to town, I want to be able to hope that the employee that works there can afford to also live in Shakopee. And so I did some math real quick, and hopefully it's correct. $24 an hour equates to about just roughly under $50,000, $4,100 a month gross. And if I remember correctly from apartments that we've been presented and toured, the one-bedroom apartment is roughly going for just under $2,000. And some of these apartments require for you to earn 3 times the rent as income. Well, that's $6,000 if it's a $2,000 a month apartment, and that would exclude somebody making $24 an hour. So maybe if we look at bumping it up so at least the average wage can afford to live in a one-bedroom apartment here in town, especially with all the apartments that we are building. That's just my thought.
Thank you. Commissioner, I just wanted to ask everybody, since you guys have already had a chance.
I agree. I don't think you want to make it too high that you're setting the bar where companies are going to go somewhere else. You just mentioned that other cities don't have the restriction that we do have, or at least that minimum. Right. So that'd be my concern, is we're chasing businesses away.
Right.
Madam President, one of the things we could maybe do is a survey, because I think picking the latest new apartment that's $2,000 a month, I think we have a lot of other apartments, but we can get the data to see kind of what the median is, and then work our way back and come back to you with kind of what the wage would need to be to live in a standard apartment.
Right.
In
I'm not looking at like our oldest apartment buildings, and I'm also not looking at our newest, most luxurious apartments. But with the wider range of ones that we do have, just what's the average one-bedroom apartment going for, and I just want to make sure that they can afford it to live here. I don't want them to come work here and then like, well, but I actually have to commute here because I can't afford to live in Shakopee, and that's the last thing I personally would want is, well, you work here but you don't live here. And I think our goal is, if I understand correctly, live here, work here, play here, all of, all of the above, so.
Commissioner Lehman?
Madam President, my goal is, I don't want to subsidize a business to come here for the jobs and the employees, to have the employees that are being subsidized now not being able to afford to live here, so having subsidized housing on top of the business subsidy that the Shakopee taxpayers paid for the business to come here. It's kind of like a double whammy. What have you created? You have really accomplished nothing. You've created employees that you have to subsidize. And the goal is to not do that. You know, I don't know what that magic number is, but I can tell you that every year we see COLA increases for city staff, employees, but we don't see that in our business subsidy policy at all. So the number that's thrown out there in 2020, there's no increase every year automatically added to it. There's no inflationary increases. So it's kind of like a double standard, actually.
Right. I understand. Commissioner Delaney, go ahead.
So that's actually a good point, when you mentioned that that's been pretty steady or solid number for many years, and inflation has.
Well, the last update was 2020, so not many years. It's not that long, 3 years. But we have had a big hit of inflation. I get it. So do we have like a suggestion, or what is the magic number? I don't know. I know.
For me,
President, my suggestion, let staff, will do some noodling on the
research.
number and bring something back. We can show what inflation would be based on the city cost of living increases. We can show what
Median apartments and.
cost of an apartment is and suggest what the wage should be.
Probably find out what the minimum requirement is for housing assistance.
So, I mean, Madam President and board members, we don't have that many subsidized apartments in the city, so it's pretty limited, and they're all full, so.
That's not what I meant. What I meant was if you make this amount of money or less, you're eligible for these benefits from.
Yeah, it's 60% of the median, and so that would be 60% of the 96,473.
Commissioner Whiting, you had one last thought or more?
No, I think if we could just bring that back with some thoughts, I think that'd be a good idea. And then possibly with that automatic increase potential.
So, good direction. Are you okay?
Yes, sir,
Yep.
ma'am.
Thank you. Where were we? So that one is done. Number 5, need more? You're good? Okay, reports. I don't think we have any, do we have any reports?
No reports.
No reports, okay. So number 6, oh, that was fast. Not fast enough, though. Number 6, adjournment. Somebody like to?
I motion we adjourn to Tuesday, November 7th, 2023 at 7 p.m.
I can second that.
Perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so we will call the Shakopee City Council meeting back to order, and we are on 10A, Monthly Financial Review. Finance Director Reinhardt.
Almost there. Good evening again, Mayor and council members. So I'll be covering the monthly financial review through September, as well as the third quarter investment report. Here's the general fund through September, so we're now at 75% of the way through the year. Generally speaking, it appears that overall we're trending for positive results for the year. On the revenue side, taxes will remain under budget targets until we get our second half settlement in December. Licenses and permits have exceeded budgeted revenues for the year, tracking close to last year levels, with building permit being the driving force of those revenues. We're also seeing an uptick in charges for services from last year. We're at about 86% of budgeted annual revenues, with Sand Venture, Ice Arena, Community Center revenues having contributed to the increase from last year. Intergovernmental is now ahead of budget targets. If you look at the September column, you'll see that we brought in a little over $900,000 in September, which is our annual police and fire state aid. And then miscellaneous includes investment income, which I'll cover on the investment slides, but investment earnings are up for the year. And then on the expenditure side, we're at 73% of our annual budget. Currently, there isn't any individual departments that are exceeding those budget targets by greater than 10%. And we reasonably expect that all departments will be within or close to their annual budget allocation. One area where we've seen some savings, which is both good and bad, but it's with personnel. We've had a number of vacancies or unfilled positions this year, including within planning, fire, and engineering and fleet, which you might see those kind of under budget in comparison to the other departments. So also included in the council packet, third quarter investment report. This slide shows interest earnings through the third quarter in comparison to the previous 4 years. That orange line being the 2023 year. We're at about 1.4 million at the end of the quarter, which is up a little bit more than double from last year at this time, and we've obviously been able to capitalize on higher interest rates. I think you'll continue to see that trend upwards for the remainder of the year, and should end up at about 2 million in investment earnings for the year, which is higher than any of the previous 4 years. And then one slide on the unrealized gain. Again, we only make this adjustment once a year at the end of the year. The orange line being 2023. So last year we had a pretty significant adjustment with the upward shift in interest rates. So far in 2023, if you compare to where we're at the end of last year, it's been relatively flat, which have resulted in an unrealized gain through the third quarter of $225,000. And then just a reminder that this is unrealized loss just on paper. And again, it just gets recorded once a year at the end of December 31st. We do plan on holding all our investments on maturity, so we never realize that unrealized gain or loss. So with that, I can stand for any questions you might have.
Questions?
No questions.
Questions on this side? No? Thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you.
Item 10A2, Cannabis Ordinance. Who's taken this one? Mr. Reynolds?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Here we have, after our discussion last time where you directed staff to make no changes, we have done all the proper noticing and everything at this point. If you wish, you can certainly at this point adopt this ordinance, which pertains to the use of cannabinoid products in public. Essentially is trying to take in consideration your particular concerns about use around children, and yet not infringing upon the right to smoke overall. No changes were made since the last time you looked at it.
Mr. Whiting?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance number 2023 TAC 012, which pertains to the use of cannabinoid products in public spaces.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Motion by Councilor Whiting, seconded by Councilor Lara. Discussion on the motion.
I just want
Go
to,
ahead.
I do actually have some discussion. Mr. Reynolds, I understand this is what we had spoken about and what we chose. Is this, it's not the same that everyone else is adopting, right?
No, actually, just about everyone that has taken action on this in the county has banned the use in parks.
Right, because if I may continue, I'm worried because even Scott County, right, Scott County.
Scott County
So
has, Savage Will, Prior Lake has.
Yeah.
Jordan seems to be the free use community, and I don't think they're going to do anything other than what is in the state law itself.
Okay.
But every other city has basically said that they are going to ban it in parks.
Right, my only worry is that, but Jordan is too, so just being in, in the county, Scott County, and kind of not mirroring what they have, is it just kind of worries me a little bit. I don't know, that's where I'm just a little like should we continue and like mirror their policy or continue with our own? That's where I'm starting to worry.
Councilor Contreras, and that's kind of what I brought up the last time we discussed this, and you know, I was looking at it from what others are doing, and, but even if I don't look at what others are doing, because I think there's gonna be a lot of different interpretations throughout the state, I didn't think it was unreasonable to follow the state model, which was, it's decriminalized, you can buy it, you can sell it, you can possess it, you can use it on your property or somebody else's property that allows you to, private property, and really keep it away from those that don't want to be exposed to it. That's kind of what I was moving toward. Council had different ideas, and I get that. The one caveat that I would point out is the council's pretty clear that, you know, if we have problems in the future, they're gonna bring it back to change. So, this is where we're at. Just thought I'd give that update on where I was at, so I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Reynolds.
And we will be monitoring complaints, and if we have those, we will compile those for city council for any discussion if we believe it is going to be necessary to make some changes.
Mr. Whiting.
I think you brought up the same points, you know, that we can bring it back, and that I don't think, I think it's much ado about nothing. I don't think there's going to be a lot of incidents, but I may be wrong, so just keep it cool.
Right.
Have a gummy.
Relax.
Discussion.
You're fine. I just wanted to make sure, just bring it up one more time. All right.
If I had my way, I would mirror Prior Lakes and the counties, but that's not the direction this council is going. But it is kind of reassuring, and hopefully everybody holds each other to that if there's problems, we bring her back.
Bring it back, yeah, okay.
Any discussion on this side? Any discussion over here?
No.
I said
Staff?
my part.
We have a motion and a second, so let's call a question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Fantastic.
I tend to think we're probably gonna have to have,
Change
we'll have problems and we'll end up changing it, but it'll be that one or two outliers that cause it.
We'll see.
All right, so this brings us to 11A, discussion on the open meeting law.
You staying for this one, Jim?
I'd be happy to go over there if it's a little bit easy for everybody. One more, back one more. Here we go.
So that's first.
Okay. Okay. Got it. We downloaded the wrong, this is not the right presentation. The one that's
do
in
we
your
have it
packet
right?
is, if you have it in your packet,
Want to sit up here and present?
yeah, let's do that. That's not, no, it's not your fault.
No, I can pull it up from the packet.
It's a subset of that particular.
Thumb drive with me, I think we put the wrong one in the thumb drive,
Oh, okay.
but I get the right one with me. Yeah. But if they all have it in paper, I can just sit down. Yeah, that's okay.
Should be, Jim, there should be an X on that table that'll put it on the monitor for you.
But if you have them in front of you, it's just as easy.
Yeah, for the folks at
If
home.
everybody has it, we get the same one.
Yeah, we have it.
Yeah, let's see if we can get that, let's see if we can
That's
get
probably
the
just as easy.
X on
Well,
it so that we can have that, share it with the screens and the folks at home. So who runs the X that does that?
Chelsea's trying to.
She's trying.
Give her 1 second.
Downloaded it, we can bring it up this way.
Off the website.
There you go.
There it is.
Perfect. Well, thanks. When some discussions with Ms. Reynolds, we thought maybe it's time for just a little more training on the open meeting law because it pops up.
Mr. Thompson, pull that microphone right to
It
you.
pops up
There you go.
from time to time. Quick history. The background to the open meeting law was in 1983, there was a court decision called Moberg versus Robbinsdale School District. The open meeting law has been around well before this decision, but in this decision, it defined a meeting for purposes of the open meeting law as a gathering of a quorum or more of the city council at which they discuss, decide, or receive information as a group on matters relating to city business. The ironic part about the open meeting law, it doesn't contain a definition of meeting, okay? So it's been judicially defined by the courts. And keep in mind that it's where you gather to discuss, decide, or receive information. Some people think you need to make a decision for it to be a meeting. It's not true. You either have to discuss or decide. So that's somewhat straightforward, but 40 years ago, there weren't electronic gatherings, didn't have emails, didn't have all these things we have now. So the question is, how does this law now apply when we're in the electronic age? And what it really comes down is to what we call serial gatherings, where you're meeting not at the same place. Obviously, you know, if you all meet at the same place and discuss city business, that's a meeting. You know, occasionally you have to be a little careful about that, like when you're walking out of a council meeting or those types of settings, you've got to be a little careful. But that's not a serial meeting. That's actually a meeting where you're all gathering. So just a word of caution on that. But the tricky stuff is on these serial meetings. So from this 1983 court decision, there's this quote. It's on the, right. So the court has this quote in it. Of course, serial meetings, again, this is when there's not electronic stuff, in groups of less than a quorum or more, for purpose of avoiding public hearings or fashioning an agreement on an issue, may also be a violation of statute, and here's the kicker, depending upon the facts of an individual case, all right? Lawyers hate that because we can't give you good guidance and a hard and fast rule, but that's what the court said. You have to, depends on the facts of each case. So, what's the definition of a serial meeting? Gatherings of less than a quorum for the purposes of avoiding public meeting or fashioning agreement on an issue, and done with the intent of avoiding the requirements of the open meeting law. Two factors then, what's the purpose of the meeting, and what's the intent of the people particularly participating in the meeting. Again, subjective factors, it gets tricky. So I'm repeating here a little bit. So whether a serial meeting has occurred depends the purpose and the intent. So there's a 1996 North Mankato case where, again, this was not electronic, but where applicants for the city administrator position were serially interviewed by all 5 members of the council in one-on-one closed interviews. The same 5 council members were present in the same building, but each conducted separate interviews of the 5 candidates. Because there was no quorum present in any of the rooms, the trial court found that there was no meeting and therefore could not be an open meeting law violation. So that case went up to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals reversed the trial court decision, sent the case back down to, and here's the kicker again, to make a factual determination on whether the council members used the one-on-one interview process to avoid the requirements of the open meeting law. In other words, went back, what was the purpose of the meeting? What was your intent? Trial court held a second trial and concluded that the private interviews were not conducted for purposes of avoiding a public meeting. The main reason for that finding was the ultimate decision on who to hire as the city administrator was made by the city council in an open meeting. So that's why the court said there was no intent to avoid it, because you ended up coming to a meeting and making the decision anyway. So the conclusion from that, well, that case got appealed again, but this time the Court of Appeals upheld it. So the conclusion from the North Mankato case is gatherings with less than a quorum of a public body held for the purpose of avoiding the requirements of the open meeting law constitute serial meetings and violate the law. So again, we're back to what's the purpose of the meeting. All right. Let's talk about emails, open meetings, and serial meetings. So Mankato was a live body case, not an electronic case, all right? So the question now becomes, this is 13 years later, in an unpublished Court of Appeals decision, can emails constitute a serial meeting? So this is what's called an unpublished Court of Appeals case, which means it's not binding. So that was 2012. The same time, 2009, and 2017, there were two what's called iPad advisory opinions. That's the state organization that issues opinions on open meeting laws, and they're advisory. And of course, I wouldn't be bringing this up to you if they didn't conflict with each other, because it would be a lot easier for the presentation. So, so the question, excuse me. All right. So in O'Keefe versus Carter, which is the Court of Appeals decision, what happened there was a recently defeated town board member sued for open meeting violations, and the claims were based on email exchanges between the town board members. The court concluded that email exchanges are not meetings because the open meeting law does not apply to written communications. So that's a court decision saying emails don't apply, okay? However, there's two advisory opinions from the State Office of Administration. Quickly summarize one for you here. What happened here was a newspaper reporter sent an email to a board member asking for comments on a newspaper story that was published. The board member sends a proposed statement to give back to the newspaper reporter and sends it to all other 7 members of the board, and they all responded with comments back to him. He then gave that response to the newspaper reporter. This board happened to be the Metro Gang Strike Task Force, which had its own problems beyond the open meeting law, but so in that opinion, so that 09 means it's a 2009 opinion. That opinion, the commissioner concluded that they were a violation of the open meeting law, even though they were emails, because they were circulated among each other, and therefore were a violation. Okay, the second opinion, whoops, excuse me, went back too far. Why the commissioner concluded the way he did was because he concluded that a quorum or more of the board commented and provided direction to the board member regarding the statement, and the group emails were the functional equivalent of a meeting. So you got an iPad opinion saying emails are the functional equivalent of a meeting. You got a court of appeal saying emails are not meetings. That's why it's good work for lawyers, right? We have to figure this all stuff out. But then the bad news for lawyers is I got to advise you folks on what the law is, so, and it can get tricky. So what the other thing the iPad opinion said was if what the board member had done had just taken action without consulting a quorum of the board, no violation would have occurred. So if he just consulted 2 others on a 7-member board, it wouldn't have been a violation. And the important thing that comes out of here, because I keep telling everyone this too, that a one-way communication is permissible. A one-way communication is not communication. It's saying something. It's not back. It's not a gathering of the body to discuss something. It's one way. But I'll get into that briefly in a second because there are still problems with it. All right, so you see the 2 conflicting opinions. Now let's just segue quickly to social media. In 2014, the open meeting law was amended to state that use of social media by members of a public body does not violate the open meeting law as long as the social media use is limited to exchanges with all members of the general public. So if an elected official has a Facebook page, it's open to everybody, no problem, okay? If they have a private one where they're dealing things privately, still not an open meeting law problem unless you're communicating with other council members on that private site. And then for this purpose, for social media, emails are not considered social media. So that has nothing to do with emails. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So what I thought would be helpful was to go through a couple hypotheticals for you. Might have more than a couple. And kind of progress down the path here to where, you know, you can get into a little bit of trouble. All right, so let's take the first one. The mayor learns that a legislative committee is having a hearing in 2 days on a bill that she believes will adversely affect the city. She contacts all council members, tell them they all gather at her house that night, and the mayor gets authority to send a letter to the chair of the committee opposing the bill. Is that an open meeting law violation? Yeah, that's not even a serial meeting, right? That's, you've gathered, okay? But it's gonna get murkier as we go on. All right. Okay, so instead of doing that, let's assume the mayor schedules, instead of scheduling a gathering at her house, the mayor does a Zoom meeting. And during the Zoom session, the mayor gets authority to send a letter to the chair. Open meeting law violation? Yes. It's electronic, but you're all gathering at the same time. All right, next variation. Instead of holding a Zoom session, the mayor drives to each council member's homes, and each council member gives her approval to send a letter to the chair opposing the bill. Is that a violation? Yes. I mean, it's serial. It's not electronic, but same result.
Jim, all those examples talked about all the members. If it was a quorum, would that still be the same?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, it's a quorum. I used all the members, but if it's a quorum, so if there's 5 members and the mayor only goes to 2 other houses, or gets two more on a Zoom call, that's a problem. If she gets 1, or let's say the 7 council, she gets 2, not a problem. I know that's very, that's just the way the law is, okay?
Not gonna be mad if it's more than 2.
That's right. Don't gather with more than a quorum. All right, so now we're past the Zoom session. And I know, well, I'm going to keep going through these because you see how you can, you know, change. So instead of meeting individually or Zooming them, the mayor calls them individually. Each council member gives her approval to send a letter to the chair of the committee opposing the bill. Is that a violation? Yes. And you got a consensus outside of a council meeting. Okay, next variation. Instead of calling each member individually, the mayor emails each council member seeking approval. Same thing, in other words, as the calling, except it's emails. And then each council member emails the mayor, or at least a quorum does. Is it a violation? I would say yes, despite the Court of Appeals decision that says emails aren't meetings, because later on you're going to hear me tell you don't follow that opinion, okay, because it's too risky. All right. So now instead of emailing each council member, the mayor sends a group email to all council members seeking approval to send the letter to the chair of the committee opposing the bill. Each council member individually emails the mayor, giving her approval to do so. Same result, still a violation. Same as above, except that each council member copies all other council members on the reply email. Is that a violation? Yes. So that's where the reply to all button gets problematical. That's why I say a one-way communication isn't a problem. What's the problem is when a council member replies using the reply to all, and now all of a sudden you're engaging in a conversation. Okay. All right, and then finally, instead of the mayor individually meeting with, calling, or emailing each council member, the mayor asks the city administrator to do so. After doing so, the city administrator tells the mayor that each council member has authorized her to send a letter to the chair of the committee opposing the bill. Is that a violation? No. Okay? If you work through the city administrator, that's not a violation of the open meeting law. Okay, so what's the bottom?
Jim, is it because he's not, or the hypothetical city administrator is not an elected official?
Yes. Oh, good point. Of the 6 of you up there, there's only 5 of you that are governed by the open meeting law, okay? And when I sit up there, same, one more. It's just the elected officials. And so this is why it's addressed to you. The staff can't violate it. You know, staff could make a mistake and forget to notice a meeting properly, but that's not a violation for you. That'd be just a technical violation. So what should the mayor and council member have done? Call an emergency meeting. Okay, that's a perfect example of where you need to call an emergency meeting.
Mr. Thompson, let me ask a question. So,
Oh, sorry.
one of the things I've done in the past is, latest one would be 16959 and 282 169. I emailed Mr. Reynolds. There was it the Met Councilor? One of them bodies were amending their transportation allocation and had them projects added. And I wanted to see if we could send a letter of support for them 2 projects. I emailed Mr. Reynolds, and I told him, council multiple times has openly supported these projects. Can we send a letter in support for these projects? And he turned around and said, yeah, sure, we can do that. You don't know if council's support dropped off, but it's been pretty consistent over a long time with our liaison on the 169 Corridor Coalition.
Okay.
The decision that this body was
Right.
going to make.
But, okay,
I guess
that's, and what you did was clearly, there's no open meeting law issue even there, okay? I know what the issue is, but it's not an open meeting law issue, because you didn't consult with anybody else before telling Mr. Reynolds what you would like him to do, okay? What you're concerned about is, do I have the back of my counsel? Am I doing this right?
Correct.
And I'm confident that they've told me in the past. That's a different issue. That's not an open meeting law issue, so.
It's up to him to make sure that there's still, the majority still supports that.
Okay, so, all right.
If council has voiced support of that in the past, then that support still stands until there's an alternate decision of council.
And to put that in the open meeting law context, the topic that you were sending the letter on, you had discussed at an open council meeting. You knew what the outcome was, and you weren't doing anything to avoid the open meeting law.
Okay.
Plus, you weren't consulting with a quorum or more of the council either, so. All right, okay, one other hypothetical. All right, council members received their packets. One of the items is a controversial matter that the council has not previously discussed at a meeting. Council member A contacts council member B to discuss the matter before the council meeting. Is that an open meeting law violation? No, it's not a communication between a quorum or more of the council. I probably could have come up with a hypothetical that wasn't going to get me in much trouble as this one, but I thought I'd give it a try anyway. So, council member A then contacts council members C and D to discuss the matter. So A calls B, A calls C and D. Is that a violation? I put probably, okay? It's on the edge. You haven't, keep in mind the definition of open meeting law of a meeting is where they gather, discuss, decide, or gather, receive information as a group. That's in the definition. So you haven't done it quite as a group, but
it's serial, isn't it?
But it's serial, and that's the whole. So that's why serial meetings become problems. So I would say probably. All right. Council member A does not contact any council member other than council member B. Okay, and then A, instead of going to C and D, member B talks to C, and that member B contacts all the other council members and tells them about her conversation with council member A. There you go. Violation, probably, okay? I say probably because there's no really cases on this, but as you know, we tend to give cautious legal advice on this because, as I've said before, most of the time when open meeting law questions are raised, it's raised because somebody's angry about you, about something, not about the open meeting law, but about something else. And, you know, they look for other issues that, you know, that might be implicated. Okay. All right. So that's actually the two simple hypotheticals. So what's my advice? Don't rely on O'Keefe. That's the Court of Appeals decision. It's an old decision. It hasn't been followed, but I'll have to say there isn't any other Court of Appeals decision that's addressed the emails since that one. with respect to open meeting law, treat emails or tweets, texts, messages, Instagram, I can't think, come on, Chelsea, help me out here. You know, there's gotta be other electronic stuff. Treat it just like a conversation, like a phone call. Treat it like a phone call, then you'll be safe. Do not engage in email conversations, serial or otherwise, between more than one other council member. And again, the caution, even a one-way email can quickly turn into a series of emails, and then work through the city administrator, because then you don't have concerns about that. And if the administrator has a concern, not about the open meeting law, but about, ooh, do you really want me to send that later, Mayor? I'm not sure the council has given you authority to do that. That's a different issue, okay? Then you discuss that. Maybe you put it on hold. You call the emergency meeting, or you come back at the next council meeting and discuss it. So it's always safer to work through the city administrator. And then finally, this is not open meeting law advice. This is just general advice. Remember that all your emails between council members will almost always be public data. So whether it's an open meeting law violation or not, anytime you write an email, you should write it with the lens of somebody in the public could see it. So anyway, that's my little spiel.
Phone calls are hard to,
they're
hard to go track down.
That part is true.
Jim, so quick question. So somebody emails the entire body, that's not considered open meeting law. Usually like a resident says, there's a pothole here.
A resident, again, the resident's not bound by the open meeting law. So that's a communication, between the resident and you. And, now it's email.
About that pothole being fixed, and then I go talk to the mayor about that pothole being fixed without a meeting. Now it's a problem.
Now it's emails. It used to be letters, right? So a constituent could write you all a letter. You might all be at your own homes. You all opening at the same time. That's not an open meeting law violation. Same thing.
Let me see if I can clarify Councilmember Delaney's question. So we all get an email from constituent X about a pothole. Councilmember Delaney responds to constituent X. He needs to make sure that his not responding to all, so it isn't going to the rest of the council, that it's a communication between him and constituent X. And then if Councilor Contreras wants to take the same email and respond to the pothole person, she would have to do the same. Reply only to that person, not the rest of council. So the constituent might get two different answers, but there was no violation of any open meeting law.
Right. Yeah, that's the safest approach to take, okay? But I will say that that's why I say, when the city administrator sends you an email, okay, be very careful about hitting reply to all on those, okay? When a constituent sends it, you're safer just by hitting reply and not reply to all. But if you hit reply to all, your communication is going to that resident. It's not going to the rest of the council. However, they are gathering information about city business. So it's safer not to hit reply to all. And you're right, your fellow council members might not know what you were telling the constituent, but back in the old days when you got a letter, when you sent a letter back, unless you copied the council members, they wouldn't know either. So the electronic part of this makes it more...
now that constituent can forward you the response from the other council member. I think it's dicey too. You better just...
Well, then it's two and it's still not a quorum.
No. That's true, but yeah, it could go other ways too.
At that point, you just pass it all over to the administration and tell them to get you out of trouble.
And even then, obviously the theme you're hearing a little bit is if you work through the city administrator to get questions answered, and now keeping this all in mind is that it's still a lot of unclear law on this, but you want to be cautious. You want to be cautious, and maybe enough said on that.
No, that was my only question.
Okay. Is there any other questions?
No.
I think it's nice for the refresher. I think it would probably benefit me, at least, to have another refresher on the, I call it the $5 rule, the
Gift law?
the gift thing. You know, and some of the questions, I already shared this with Mr. Reynolds, but since now we're in a meeting, it's not a violation to talk about it. But, you know, it gets confusing because if Councilor Contreras is an appointed liaison to Group X, and they're having a $30 plate meal, she's now accepting something at value more than $5, right? Is she able to partake in that meal? Because we appointed her to that, and we're, as a city, a member of that, my understanding is that would be acceptable. And I'm only using you as an example. Correct?
If we are paying dues to the organization, then yes. I mean, that essentially is part of what you're paying the dues
Right.
for,
Right.
is for the meals and.
Right?
Yeah, if it's part of the, if you're a dues-paying member of the organization and
No.
you go to.
And that's why I want more clarity, because if you go to a ribbon cutting and they've got brats on the grill for the general public and, you know, pop or something.
That's all okay, because it's open to the general public.
Right. So I think going through that whole exercise would probably be beneficial to everybody too.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. And the one thing to keep in mind in the meantime is kind of the rule I always say, if you think you're getting something because you're a city council member,
Then pay for it yourself.
It's probably a gift.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, it's probably a gift. Now, it has to come from what's called an interested person. You know, if your brother gives you a gift, that's not, they don't do business usually with the city. So, but, you know, if you're in the dues pay, if you're at ribbon cutting and everybody's getting the cake and you're not getting it because you're a member of the council, you're getting it because you're there, you know, you're there as a mayor, but everybody else in the public is getting the same
So
thing.
I probably shouldn't go on and on, but a constituent calls and asks Councilor Laura to stop over. He wants to show him something, blah, blah, blah. And while he's over there talking to his constituent on the constituent's property, now they want to give him a cup of coffee and a donut while they're talking. Okay or not?
Yeah, that's,
I would not do that.
I mean, it would not what?
I would not do that.
Yeah, it's less than $5 is that's what I'm assuming.
What's less than $5 these days,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you know, just, the key is just don't put yourself in those situations. And something like that, it's like, no, thank you, I appreciate it. It's like when I go out, someone will want to, you know, buy me something. I'm like, no, you know, and I explain, I go, no, I take pride in the fact that no one's ever going to take my integrity into any type of issue, because I refuse that consistently and just simply will not do it. And it just, you know, buy me a drink, it's you know, it's $8, big deal, right? But guess what? It is a big deal. It's something, it's the perception. It's that perception that is so key.
So a refresher on that would be good.
Yeah, and there are best practices, and then what the black letter law
Right,
is,
yeah.
and what
And
Mr. Reynolds is telling you is what the best practice is.
And just for the record, I'm only picking on you, Mr.
No, I get it. You're using examples. It was good, but that brings me up a question. So when we do our night to unite, and they're like, oh, go help yourself to this and that, like, you know, and they have a plate of cookies there. It's not to be rude. I mean, just the rule of thumb is just politely decline.
That's open to the public event.
Anybody would get a
Open
cookie.
to the public, and that's a $5 cookie, I want that.
Be careful.
But the people that are walking down the street to that open public event, a guy from the next neighborhood could walk over and he's gonna get a cookie too.
Okay.
You know?
I don't know.
I'd be more concerned about all five of you being at an event and gathering in one place at 3 times and talking to each other. Because even no matter how harmless that looks, or is, you could be talking about your kids. People.
It's about perceptions, yeah.
Perceptions, right, yeah.
All right, well,
All right.
would council like to have a refresher on that other aspect too?
Sure. This
Okay.
is great. I appreciate
Very
it.
good.
I'll
Yep.
work it out with Mr. Reynolds, yeah. Okay, thanks.
12A, thank you, Mr. Thompson. City bill list. Questions, comments?
No questions.
Nothing on that.
All right. 12B, liaison and administration. Which end did we start last time? I think we started on here last time.
so I'll
we're
start.
over here.
No official liaison reports, as nothing has met yet, but October 7th, I attended the downtown trick-or-treat event. Lots of people, vendors, and everyone seemed to be having a good time. good turnout. And then today there was quite an array of events. Let's see, there was the ribbon cutting to the 169 pedestrian bridge. And when I was driving home from work today, I saw people using it, so that's great to see. And then we had our groundbreaking for the amphitheater. That's it.
Very good, thank you. Councilor Contreras?
Thank you, Mayor. October, no, sorry, I can't even remember what day. Friday, so I went to the scale meeting, just a general scale meeting. Lots of talk of transportation issues related to the policy and funding, which, let's see, we had Senator Scott Dibble, Senator Zach Ducksworth, Representative Frank Hornstein, and Representative John Petersburg. Great information about all the projects that you always talk about. That was that, and then Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District also talked about some good stuff. I mean, sometimes I'm like, what is this? But they even had a little quiz, and yeah, it was, I missed one, so I thought it had all of the cities, because I was like, well, it must be all of them, but no, City of Credit River is not part of it. I learned that. And then right after, I went to the RTF meeting, and I did give everybody, I'm not even close, sorry about that. I did give everybody it's a two-pager and a little map that I'd like for everybody to, go home and read it. Still the question is what to do is the question, pretty much. There's options because we know obviously that there's still state bond awards on it, and if this building were to not keep the RTF and do different, I mean, there's different things that would happen. The Scott County would be have to pay back like $3 million. I think it's $3 million. If it's done before this, time happens, like the maturity dates on these bonding awards are what, 37.5 years. And it just, I want you guys to go home and read this more. And then it talks about how it's historically, yes. And then I just go home and read, because there's a lot of options. I know where we stand, but there's still a lot of a lot of work to do.
Does staff have a copy of that?
I did give one to Mr. Reynolds, okay. Yeah.
And I think the current bonds that are on it, we are obligated to continue, even if we would decided to step out, we would still have to pay the couple of years that are left on our obligation.
Right, no, but you're right, but I guess what I was talking about is, like, for example, so the RTF received 1 million state bonding in 06, 08, and 11, so 3 million total. The maturity dates on these bondings award are 37.5 years. The bonding awards, what I'm trying to see, if things would change, right? Mm-hmm. And if it were not to be built there or it would be demolished, the Scott County has to pay back some money, unless it says if Scott County sold the property and the site was no longer used as a regional training facility, the county's payback to the state would be $3 million. If sold before 2040, $2 million, before 2045, $1 million, and before 2048, $1 million before 2048. So note the state bonding award obligation is different than the county issued 5 million bonds that infused money into the original development of the facility. So there's still a lot of options, and then the building is registered, the other one, these are just points that we kind of have to continue, thinking of, and then how the consultant group, it's 106 group, tearing down all the portions of the historic building is possible, but would require lengthy process. That's why I'm like, I know where we stand. I know we're not willing to continue, but it's just information that everybody else has to,
It's not free.
Right, exactly. And I'm not sure if, Scott County would be interested in paying back $3 million.
Well, not all of that $3 million is Scott County's responsibility. There's members that agreed at the beginning that, like Shakopee, that some of them, the portion of that bond that is for our membership portion, that we would be on the hook for that portion, which isn't the whole 3 million, but it's a piece of the 3
Right.
million.
Yeah.
And there's other members there also that have a piece. All these pieces equal at 3 million, so it's not Scott County's full.
Okay, well,
3 million.
the way I understood it, you know, well, someone has to pay for it there. Someone has to pay for it. It's not
Right.
free. Okay, so, and then, so when you get a chance, just, you know,
Yep, everybody do your
Everybody
homework
read
on what she handed out. That's really nice that you took the time to hand that out to everybody, and
Um,
forward your questions to staff, and maybe Mr. Reynolds and Finance Director Reinhardt can put together some numbers on our portion of the bonds and what these different bonds might be and who's responsible for them and stuff like that, so we all have the same information.
Yep. And then I think I just, I attended the Ped Bridge ribbon cutting and the groundbreaking too for the amphitheater. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Whiting?
Well, thank you. So, Ped Bridge today, that was great. We have a great connection from South Bridge to our Quarry Lake area. All of us were there. I think that was great too, and staff did a good job in putting that together. That was a little bit of state money, but mostly Shakopee funding, as I believe. So, was it 2 million state, 3 million Shakopee, or however we got to pay for it? But it's actually a beautiful bridge. It's not just. Yeah, and it has some nice stuff. And then the amphitheater groundbreaking, a new addition to Shakopee. We're talking about some of the building techniques, and that's going to be a cool project. So as we watch it develop, that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Delaney?
Let's see, did the same thing, the bridge and the groundbreaking. I appreciate staff, but they put that together. They got it 8 in the morning and noon. Thank you for putting that together, getting everybody organized over there. Nothing on 169. Our next meeting is 9 November. Same thing for Spuck. This is the first time I didn't have a meeting in between council meetings. Didn't know really what's it.
You had a life for a week.
Yes. So who was the first council member across the bridge? I know I was the first one back.
Got my steps in. Well, there was a bike. I do recall an administrator on a bike.
Straight on the
He
bike.
might have won.
I was beaten by a 10-year-old
There's a
girl
kid there that
at
wanted
the
to be
very end. She came zipping by me, and I'm like, oh, great.
away from the kid. Yeah.
Let's see, on October 10th, I met with Senator Pratt at the Brew Hall. He had a get-together with Pratt night thing, general topics, what's going on at the legislature. October 11th, Mr. Reynolds and I met with the Municipal Legislative Commission. Is it commission or committee?
Commission.
MLC. Up in Chanhassen. What else? This morning we did ribbon cutting of the 169 Ped Bridge going into South Bridge from the Quarry Lake Bike Trail, BMX Trail. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing the LED lighting when it's done. It's kind of tucked underneath. I think that's going to be pretty cool, and you're probably not even going to see it as a driver on the road. So yeah, pretty nice, big. I hope it lasts for 50 years before there's any major replacement cost. Looks like it's built pretty solid. We also attended the amphitheater groundbreaking today. We had all the council there. We probably, if we were still there, we might have the band ready to go. We kind of tried to get everybody in to start working for 8-10-hour shifts and get her done, but staff wouldn't let us do that. So
2 shovels and I was done.
too much liability apparently, and we don't know what we're doing either. So I think that's all I have. Mr. Reynolds.
Nothing from staff, sir.
All right. Any other business? Any other business?
I'll make a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, November
No,
7th.
hold on.
Do we miss
Item
one?
number 14.
Oh, missed one. That's right.
Item number 14, Mr. Whiting.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session according to Minnesota statutes 13D TAC 03 subdivision D for labor negotiation strategy.
And that was subdivision B.
B.
Motion by Mr. Whiting, seconded by Mr. Delaney. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion passes. We're in closed session.
All right, if you'll give me a few